Oh man, so many like technical issues here at All Wise Transformation. Glitch this, glitch that. Anyway, Juno, what have you been up to? What's going on in your world?
So much has been happening. I am starting to write my third book. I've, I've, wait, is it my third? Yeah,
Yes,
I,
it's
I
your
guess
third.
technically it's
Yes,
my third
yes, yes,
because we
it's your
have
third.
the poetry book, which is still like in motion. Make Me Gape, which by the way, I brought a selection from if you would like me to read it for you. I thought I would bring one today
Oh,
because it's the most recent one that I wrote. Um, I have the book on nervous system regulation, which I'm writing. I have Unbound, which is this kind of journey of personal freedom and finding your own path and using ritual to light your own personal like way. And yeah, and then I have a recipe book that I'm like that has been like shelved like and taken on and off the shelf for years. I have a total of I have more recipes than I need now, which is hilarious. I have 99 recipes. I just have to finish writing the short stories for them. So I was like, oh, okay. So that'll happen eventually. So I'm in the midst of all that. I just created for my website um, a nervous system regulation, not protocol, but like let's say an audit to tell how your nervous system is responding. Because I think a lot of people in today's world are very stuck in fight or flight and they don't realize it, which totally rightfully so in today's environment. Um, but the question is like fight or flight totally has a purpose, but if you're always stuck in it, it doesn't hold the same potency, let's say. Like fight or flight is great in bursts, like if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or ice. And the otherwise, like we don't want to be in that mode because
yeah,
it
yeah.
could be really damaging, right? Overproduction of cortisol, inability to sleep, dysregulated hormones. You can't tell sometimes if you're hungry or you're not hungry, right? Because when you're in fight or flight, digestion doesn't fully come online because your body's not saying, I'm safe enough to eat and digest. Which is why sometimes you'll hear people say, like, oh, I'm eating my feelings, because when you do eat, it does stimulate the vagus nerve and automatically drops you into parasympathetic because it has to be out of that mode. So there's like logic to a lot of those like kind of little colloquial expressions. So I've been doing a lot, and
Yeah.
that 30-day nervous system reorientation is what I'm calling it is available for free on my website, and I'll give you the link to that so you could like put it in the link for everyone or send it out or do whatever you want to do
Yeah.
with it.
Wait, so was wait, so was that a bit of what you sort of helped me through a couple of weeks ago? So folks don't know, like a couple of weeks ago there was like a bad snowstorm here. And I live in Vermont. And mind you, I was being really cheap about getting new tires. And so it really came back and bit me in the rear of my car. So I literally got stuck. So where I live close to a ski resort, and so it's Killington, and so Killington is sort of like the highest mountain around here. And I was coming from the other side of Killington, and I'm sort of going up the hill, um, and then because it's snowing and it's snowing pretty bad, I couldn't make it up the hill, and so I got stuck, and I was sort of tail fishing back and forth, and I would sort of like go in reverse, and then I would sort of go forward again, and then I would just get stuck, and that would just keep on happening. And at one point, I literally like almost like ran into the guardrail, and I like started like hyperventilating. And I was like, "What do I do? What do I do?" It's like, "Call Juno, call Juno." And what Juno said to me was like, take a deep breath, girl. Take a deep breath."
I mean, taking a deep breath is definitely part of what the nervous system reorientation thing is about. But more than the actual tools to de-escalate, the reorientation gives you it gives you steps to kind of realize what your nervous system is doing. Because I feel like so many times we live in like this autopilot mode where we're just doing and going because of like productivity culture and all that. I was just, I got to get it done. I got to get through it. And there's a validity to that, right? We all need to pay our bills and we all need to do the things. But just doing the thing and not paying attention to the signals that you're actually getting from your body can actually be super um disadvantageous. It can lead to sickness, making poor decisions, um using methods of coping that are maybe not the most healthy, right? Because if you're in fight or flight, you can't communicate with yourself. All of a sudden you're getting signals about I'm anxious, you think you're hungry, you're overeating, maybe you're using substances to regulate your nervous system or to downregulate because it's the only way you could downregulate. Um, so it just reorients you inside of your physical container. That way you can more successfully have language for what's actually happening in your body.
Yeah, so you're at least if I'm understanding, you're talking about like having a practice, right? So like in my example, I was sort of in a particular crisis, having a panic attack or close to getting a panic attack. Because cars were honking at me. They were just like, I'm like, I can't get out of the way, and you're honking at me. Like, what's the point? But you're literally saying this is a practice in the sense of being aware of your body, being aware of like of how your body's moving through the world and sort of the interaction that you have with the substances that you put into your body and like the reactions of that, what happens from that. So it's an ongoing practice you're talking about. It's not necessarily sort of like a like a kit to help somebody who's having like a fight or flight moment.
Well, this it happens in two phases, right? Because I offer group coaching and one-on-one coaching for people specifically around like the tools and strategies for nervous system regulation. And actually, this Monday, which I think is February 2nd, there's a video coming out on my YouTube channel, which talks about a form of regulation and bringing yourself into kind of centeredness. And that is like, I'm talking about like emotional freedom technique, like tapping and stuff like that. And I'm going to be walking people through like an affirmation thing. That's this Monday on YouTube. And s- more and more, I'm producing content around kind of thought leadership in the area of wellness, but just not just mental health and like that form of wellness, like queer wellness, because our immune systems develop completely differently than heterosexual immune systems because, and I mean, not just queers, but like anyone that's been othered. So like people of color, women, anyone that does not by default fit the heteronormative straight male mold. Um, you, whether you realize it or not, were brought up in an environment where your body needed to like scan for safety. It needed to adjust. It needed to do things like that. And yes, everyone experiences that to some extent. However, people that are othered or minorities or um, I like to always say like not the one that the story was written for, right? Like anyone that falls outside of the mold experiences that in a more profoundly extreme way. So it affects like the brain development and things like that, and how the nervous system reacts from very early on. And because queer people are often forced to ask themselves questions that straight people don't deal with until they're in their like 50s sometimes. Like, how do I belong in this world? I do not fit in this container. Like, what is my job here? Lots of queer people ask that themselves those questions before their brain is even fully developed because they just can tell they're different. And so that's something maybe Larry, who's an accountant, might not ask himself until he's 50, whereas like I don't know, Chris, who is trans and is dealing with identity issues and also like, do I like boys? Do I like girls? Am I a boy? Am I a girl? Like, what is happening in all of this? They have to ask themselves those questions much earlier, like sometimes even pre-puberty, right? Because like I remember as a child, I identify as non-binary. I remember really being drawn to girls things, like the girl things, like dolls and stuff like that. And I wanted an easy bake oven, and those were things I was not allowed to have. Um, Not because my mom, by the way, was one of my grandparents was like, no. which I also don't understand why I wouldn't be allowed to have an easy bake oven because like my family's owned restaurants for over 100 years. So like that shouldn't have been that much of an alarmist moment, but whatever. Um, who cares? Who's to say? Um, but like those types of instances send signals to small children like this is not for you. This thing that you're existing in does not fit the container of what you desire. So then it leads to developmental things that happen just differently. And in the one-on-one coaching container, it's different because like you get small strategies during the 30-day audit and you get like a language basically for how to identify what's happening to you. But in the coaching container that I hold, what we do is we systemically dismantle all of that, right? Like we go into childhood and we examine things we're letting go of, we need to let go of. We examine the difference, the chemical difference between fear and desire and what they're actually saying. Like desire
Mm.
is your heart rushing towards something and being like, this is for me. And then fear is saying like, okay, but is it safe? like, like wonderful that it's for you. Is it safe for it to be for you? So we kind of do a lot of reframing, and that's where you get like really kind of deeper tools outside of breath work and like tapping. Like that's where you get more like the social work aspect of myself and the psychology aspect of myself, with like deep understanding and releasing things. And then uh, by the end of it, it gets very like philosophical because the whole way through we're talking about neurology in the brain in addition because like you can't really talk about the nervous system without talking about the brain. I mean you could, but it'd be a little bit empty. So um I guess you
No,
could.
no pun intended. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing, as I'm listening to you speak in the sense of like, as othered, right? I do distinctly remembered not necessarily feeling safe in my own body, even though I was, I grew up very sheltered. As a person who's othered, I not only struggle with a learning difficulty, but I am like queer and person of color, right? And like I come from an immigrant family, right? So there are all of these things, and I just never and I think I'm better at it now, but I just distinctly remember just not feeling safe in my own body in the sense of like my desires. It's like, oh, I shouldn't desire those, or when I started, going through puberty and I started having like these boners, and I'm like, why am I having these
What's
boners? My
happening?
body my body is not listening to me. I want my body to do this, and I want my voice to sound like that, and and so I just really distinctly remembering feeling like I had no control over my body, and that felt very distressing, in
Yeah.
developing sort of like my identity and developing sort of like who I wanted to be, or how I wanted to be. It was very distressing, and so to have a practice that sort of reorientates you back into your body. It's a very, for me, it sounds like a very sort of like somatic work, right? Like the ability to really engage the body, because as you come from both of us coming from sort of like clinical and social backgrounds, where we've been taught to only address the mind, right? Only taught to only address sort of like the cerebral aspects. But I think as you sort of stepped out, and as I'm sort of like realizing, like, like talk therapy is probably like 1%,
Yeah.
if not less than the healing process, that
My
should happen.
realization, which led me away from clinical social work, which I was doing, was that I felt like it was a really incomplete modality. And not only was it an incomplete modality, but it's an incomplete modality that's not really interested in learning to do more. Like it basically says, this is the approach and this is what we're doing. And that's fine. I just, having worked with a lot of people experiencing trauma and seeing what I saw and knowing what I know about somatic practices, yoga, breathwork, stuff like that. Um, and then also getting much deeper with things like breath work and um like I don't want to say magic traditions, but like studying esoterica and like kind of deeper which I consider like I consider that like a form of psychology. So like esoteric practices, and that's a whole nother conversation. But like getting real deep in the other side of the human brain, I was like, oh, social work isn't complete because it just kind of re-traumatizes you. Or it can. I'm not saying that like the whole practice is that way, but like the closest thing to what I believe is an effective practice is cognitive behavioral therapy. However, cognitive behavioral therapy is also kind of incomplete because it leaves it in the brain. It doesn't move it through and out the body. And if anything, it can it can just leave you going like, "Oh, this is the cycle. I see the cycle and I try to do the interrupt point, but it doesn't necessarily always work." And even still, sometimes you can't always swap out, right? Like when you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy and you're going through the wheel, it's which is like experience the feeling, acknowledge the feeling, bring awareness to the feeling, shift the behavior, right? Like that's the pretty much the wheel of cognitive behavioral therapy. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. So I think part of truly like breaking that thing is a really simple example. I'll give you using your phone at night, right? Like a lot of us doom scroll at night, and a lot of us get stuck in this thing where all of a sudden it's like we went to bed at 11 and all of a sudden it's 3 in the morning and we're doom scrolling videos of like things that are spiking our cortisol right before bed, and it's really bad for us chemically. So a good way to help break that habit is when when you catch yourself and it's like, say you decide you're not going to use your phone after 10:30 p.m. anymore, right? That's your cutoff. That's your technology bedtime, let's say, even if you're going to stay up and write or whatever. Um, if you look at the clock at all, if you glance and you see it's like 11:30 or 1 or whatever, that's when you just put your phone across the room somewhere and walk away from it because you have a pattern interrupt. And like that simple act is outside of what social work does. It's you're relying too much on like the willpower of the person, in my opinion. And like, why would you actively tell a person who's already stuck in a patterned behavior to swim upstream? You can't tell them to just like think differently. I mean, you can, and it works for many people to an extent, but I think there's a better way to do it. And I've never been one to
Yeah.
just like sit idly by. So
I am. You, when I was in the early part of my my master's program, I had I had a professor, um because I think the class was introduction to psych. Again, it was a master's levels course, and I remember it was a paper that I had to write about a I can't remember if it was a particular theorist or modality. Um, but I remember going to the professor and saying like, you know, I wanted to sort of focus my paper more so on sort of Afro-Caribbean psychology, Afro-Caribbean um, um, treatments, and you know what she said to me?
what?
um, you shouldn't really uh it's not there's no research papers that are done on folk magic. And I was like, but it's a it's a whole field. It's a whole field of working with people of color, you know, that like they have their own framework. And I I don't understand why you would say that. But
Colonialism.
for her, but for her, you know, anything outside of Western psychology, outside of Freud, outside of Carl Jung, like anything outside of that, was not considered legitimate. Even though there's a whole textbook on African American psychology, right? Like the you know sort of a framework on family systems within you know the Afrocentric you know Caribbean centric framework. Like there are whole books and sections on that and most of that has nothing to do with like folk magic or any of that kind of stuff, right? It's like a legitimate field. But the fact that she said that said to me, right, like the Western standard is the only way to do therapy and to address behavioral problems, right? Because it's so much to a certain degree, um, uh, pull yourself by your bootstraps, right? And I think you were sort of mentioning that idea about that because you're not engaging in the right behavior, then you sort of are making a choice, right? Like then you sort of need to find the behavior to make the change, and do things differently, which leaves out community, right? Which leaves out, like, a supportive network, right? It falls on the individual to fix themselves, um, in sort of like a talk therapy framework, and even though, like, everything is sort of on the participant to sort of do the work, but there's no talk about what's going on in your body. And more so now, I think it's happening, but to a degree, like, insurance companies are not gonna pay for somatic work, right? Like, insurance companies don't care about sort of the vagus nervous system, right? Like, they
Which is so weird to me.
it's not in the DSM.
Yeah, which is it's, like, so weird to me that it's not acknowledged in that way because I'm like, it is a chemical process that's happening in the body. It is a traceable, like, it is a pathway of neurological reactions that happen in the body. It's scientifically traceable, which is, in my opinion, what science is for, right? Like to be able to distinguish shifts and the study that's biology. So I don't understand why it would not be understood or received by insurance, but you're 100% right. And also what the woman was talking about, I'm assuming you said her, right? You said the teacher was a
Yeah,
her.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's very steeped in racism and colonialism. And I mean, it could be traced back probably to like late Victorian England when a whole lot of things shifted in the world. Um, and like lightness and whiteness became like even more of the primary narrative. I mean, we could go back to the Council of Nicaea for that actually, but that's like in is it? Yeah, it's AD. It's like 300 AD or something. But there, as long as there is division, there's a quest for control, and there's saying that this group is the primary voice because there's this limiting idea that if you are not the primary voice, somehow you're not going to have anything. When really, there's like enough for everyone, right? There's enough for everyone to have dinner. There's enough for everyone to sit at the table. But there's this illusion of like scarcity that so much of society is based on. And I think that's more of like a greater systems issue, right? Because this person, I don't know what they were like, but I imagine most people that are social workers or in mental health don't get into mental health to oppress people. You know what I mean? They get into mental health to help people. And arguably, like the fact that this person acknowledged um, Young as a leader because they would have to, as someone who practices psychology, right? Um, everything fits. Not everything. Everything doesn't fit into the Jungian model of like archetypes and depth psychology, but really, Jung was pretty radical, and very, um, he was very interested in the study of like the mystical and how it processed through the brain, and this idea of like uh the collective unconscious and things like that. It was just a whole different approach to the brain.